Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits show, and I'm your host, Miko Bits. Today, I have an exciting show for you. It's Emma Jane McKinnon Lee, who is from Digitalax, and this space is very exciting. It's really related to a lot of the conversations we've been having around NFT or non-fungible tokens. So it relates to the blockchain, and it relates to the collection of digital assets and experiences. So I think, without further ado, let's get straight into it. So Emma Jane, nice to have you on the Miko Bits show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess the first thing to ask is how, tell us about your project. Tell us about Digitalax.
Sure. So Digitalax, we're, I guess, a little bit unique or different in the space. We're an NFT protocol. We're built on Ethereum, and we're focused on the digital fashion market segment. So this industry is really quite new, and it has a lot of ties and links to 3D content when it comes to gaming, VR, these kind of applications. But we're looking at more from a side of distribution. So how you can enable the digital fashion industry from a distribution side. And this is really where we started looking at NFTs and how they can add value for digital assets and kind of distributing digital assets from that supply chain perspective. So to kind of give the background of Digitalax and what we're focused on, we have a number of verticals. Our bigger vision is really around how you can enable digital fashion through NFTs for gaming and VR. So we've started with building out a marketplace. And on our platform, we partnered with a number of digital fashion designers globally, where they're creating really cool 3D hyper-realistic digital fashion assets, and they're listing them for auctions in our marketplace as NFTs, ERC 721s, and then buyers are able to come on and bid within certain time periods to purchase these assets in a sense. So that's really how we've started. But the bigger vision is how you can kind of, as I mentioned, enable this digital supply chain through using NFTs to kind of have that on-chain verification and authenticity of these digital assets, to be able to streamline the process of shipping content into the gaming and VR applications. So to kind of like give a brief breakdown of how we're tackling that, we're looking very much at like unique concepts of the digital fashion supply chain and how you can use NFTs to enable that. So all of the NFTs on our platform, these garments, they're issued as ERC 721s, but we're kind of partnering that with a variation of the ERC 998s contract. And this ERC 998, it's about how you can have a master NFT and link that with kind of child NFTs, or have this master NFT own a collection of other NFTs, whether that's 1155s or 721s. So on our platform, all of these 721 tokens that are issued, they actually own different sets of 1155 tokens. And this is really an interesting concept, and it's this new kind of innovation that we're bringing forward in the space around fractional garment ownership within a supply chain. So how you can kind of have modular and building block components of a garment down to a material, a pattern, a texture level, and enable kind of artists and designers to be able to issue these 1155s of patterns and textures, and then have the master garment kind of asset or digital fashion piece be able to use those 1155s from both an on-chain perspective through this kind of 998 standard, where the 721 actually owns these 1155s on-chain, but also from a graphical and fidelity perspective, where these patterns are actually used within the master garment design. So it's kind of this whole supply chain that we're building up, and how you can kind of give, I guess, a creator or a designer more power and access to modular components of a design, and then to build up a really amazing piece that can then be verified and authenticated from an ownership perspective through the blockchain, and then be able to ship that into a game and use NFTs as that authentication. So that's kind of a brief overview. We're looking a lot at the side of cross-platform interoperability of digital assets and how digital fashion can be taken into different platforms, both blockchain and non-blockchain, particularly from a virtual experiences side. But I guess that's kind of, a big chunk of what we're doing. And I'll stop there and kind of let you ask more questions and go into more details.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's exciting, and it's definitely a really interesting thing. I understand that you already have some traction with respect to sort of sales of the assets. So maybe you can describe a little bit about what the early reception has been and what are the assets that are doing well for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we were very humbled and shocked even and unexpected, I would say, by kind of the exposure that we were able to gain and the designers were able to gain on our platform. So, I mean, we're a new protocol. We only started our first auctions about 3.5 weeks ago. And as I said, we've partnered with about 30 digital fashion designers based globally. They're all amazingly talented. They're based in Rwanda to all locations in Europe to Australia, US. Some of them have a background in Nike. So really, really talented and creative. And we partnered with them for our first 2 auctions that we run on the platform. The first auction, we had an average selling price of 1,000 USD per garment. So that was around kind of 2 ETH or so. But then we just literally had our second auction, which closed on Monday. And this was even more insane, where it was around 4,000 USD average selling price per garment. And that was 9 designs that sold for a total of 50 ETH altogether. So kind of absolutely and crazily hectic. A lot of the bids have come in. I mean, how we've kind of run them, it's been a time series. So the first auction ran for 2 weeks, and then our second auction was only a 4-day auction. And all of the bids kind of, it's very mild, I would say, in terms of bidding throughout most of the process. But in the last kind of 4 or 5 hours, even up to the last 10 minutes, it goes like absolutely hectic. And we partnered with one, very talented OG crypto artist, Robness, for our second auction that we just run. And this was kind of a part of this fractional garment ownership side. So he provided these really cool artistic or crypto artistic dimensional fabrics and textures and patterns that then our designers used within the garments. So we partnered with him, and I think that his community got really involved as well with the design. So we had our highest sale or digital fashion piece in that auction, and it was for 12.5 ETH for one garment. So an incredible reception that we're really humbled by.
That's fantastic, and it's great. It's great to see kind of this exciting initial successes and these kind of traction points. One of the things that I think the audience would love to understand better is kind of the experience environments, right? So, like, what are the formats, and how do people experience your creations and art?
Great, very good question. I mean, this is kind of a bigger question in the space, I would say, around NFT industry in general, because I feel like the industry is at a stage where it's getting a lot of traction in the past few months. I know if you think about Super Rare, that platform, I think that they've been around for about 3 years now.
Sure.
But I think 80% of their volume literally came in the past 3 months or so. So we're definitely on a big bull run with NFTs. And it's been very much driven around this cosmetic side. And this is really Digitalax, our first 2 auctions. It was focused around purely the cosmetic side of these digital fashion NFTs, where they didn't have any utility or application. And buyers were buying it from that, more, I'd say, investor relationship and cosmetic side, and seeing, I guess, a longer term value in the graphic itself. But Digitalax, because we are digital fashion focused, there's that expectation, I would say, around fashion, is that it has some utility and application. And from a digital perspective, that really comes in through 3D environments, through digital experiences, gaming, VR. These are kind of our biggest use cases. And this is really where we're focusing on, is how you can create this, I guess, digital fashion toolkit and engine for, enabling people to come on, purchase really cool fashion assets, which comes with a lot of this idea of self-expression and identity, and how you can enable that through fashion, and then be able to take these into different VR or digital environments, and kind of utilize that. So I guess to give kind of a different scope on some of the business use cases of digital fashion, and where that comes from. Obviously, a really big one is just gaming in general, particularly from more like a metaverse and multiplayer side. If you think about Fortnite, some of their biggest model comes from their skins. Sure. And players really wanting to be able to self-express. So these kind of gaming environments, both blockchain and non-blockchain based, is really a big kind of area that we're targeting as Digitalax and as our marketplace and platform. But it also extends much more. And I can say that, I guess, more tangibly as a protocol, what we've been able to achieve is our first partnership actually in the space that we just launched or announced last week. And it's a really kind of a bigger thing for the NFT space in general, where our digital fashion assets are being accepted into these personalized virtual world app by UCAN. They're actually a Silicon Valley-based company. They kind of create these personalized virtual worlds. They're browser-based, but they're 3D. They have these avatars, and you can kind of create these worlds and go in and experience different events, hold virtual conferences, hold virtual concerts, different events in that aspect. And we're their first digital fashion dedicated partner, where our NFTs are being accepted within this non-blockchain environment. So pretty much if you come on our Digitalax platform and you purchase a digital fashion NFT, you can then go into the UCAN world and have your NFT recognized under these Ethereum or ERC 721 standards from a digital ownership perspective. So if you owned an exclusive NFT on Digitalax, then within UCAN, you would also have that exclusive asset, which I think is a really amazing use case that we've been able to kind of pull off for the broader NFT ecosystem from this cross-platform interoperability side, because I definitely think that that's the future of NFTs when it comes to, creating more value for application utility. It shouldn't just be about having an NFT that is siloed within one platform, but how you can kind of, use that cross-platform and enable these digital experiences. So that's kind of the first use case that we've enabled. And then kind of building on top of that, we also partnered with another entity, a Revolution of Celebration, and they're also working with UCAN as well to enable the first kind of biggest New Year's Eve virtual concert that's being hosted this December 31st. And Digitalax is the official crypto digital fashion partner, where we have this VIP virtual room that you can buy a ticket for, and you can come in as an avatar and experience the conference. And it's really crazy, actually. There's a 60 million audience reach. There's 2 artists performing. They're really big in the space. Tusi, he's a rapper. He just signed with Capitol Records last week. And Farina, she's Latin American artist, and has a really great follower base. And then it's hosted by Amanda Cerny. So it's been an amazing experience. I would say that we're humbled as Digitalax as such kind of an early protocol to be able to work with, amazing minds here within San Francisco, where we're based as well, and kind of show the use cases and business models around, digital fashion merchandising for experiences, and how, players can have identity through digital fashion assets. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I think one of the things that's happening, broadly speaking, of course, is that, we're seeing sort of extraordinary price support for Bitcoin at north of 23,000. And one of the things that's happened is that people are talking about this as sort of a generational asset class, right? So the thing that's kind of novel is sort of the erosion of institutional trust and kind of the emerging generational kind of thesis around blockchain and blockchain authentic ownership, right? So I guess the thing that's really interesting to kind of look at is how do you see kind of longer term futures in kind of your domain, right? Because obviously we do understand from previous shows that, like, authenticity and proof of ownership and kind of, to some extent, sort of vanity, and this kind of idea of the whole thing as a cosmetics industry, I think it makes a ton of sense. But I guess, where does it go after that?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of like fundamental layers to it, and how you look at it, and kind of different levels that you can break down. Maybe to kind of first address, what you were saying more from that financial perspective, with Bitcoin reaching kind of a new price level and a new all-time high. I think part of that came from a really big push in this space in crypto in general this year with DeFi, and kind of the big boom that we saw around that over particularly kind of that summer period with August, September, October. And what I kind of gathered a lot from that was crypto was able to really touch on a first principle, or DeFi was, with individuals and users around this idea that they could put value in terms of cryptocurrency and get more value back. And I think that's kind of a big heuristic in a sense of really touching on a first principle of human nature around wealth generation and these kind of aspects, and really why it was able to take off. And so the reason why I kind of talk about that, and where that, I guess, relates to this digital fashion and gaming industry that we're looking at, is the reason why I was drawn a lot to digital fashion was really when I looked at the industry, it was a lot around understanding that this is a first principle, or kind of a human nature kind of industry. If you think about fashion in general, it's a core industry that's been around for thousands of years. I mean, go back to Egyptian times, go to 1800s. Fashion has always had a use case within society. If you think about maybe from a status symbol, like you mentioned, more vanity side, but particularly this idea of like self-expression and identity. It's this direct channel of communication that we use. And I think that a lot of the time we don't realize how kind of important and attached it's been throughout society, and just a core fundamental of human nature and human characteristics in general. So kind of looking at that side and that fundamental first principle of fashion, when I think about the future, I really believe that 3D content, 3D real-time content is, a hugely kind of scalable and growth industry. And that gaming, VR, these digital experiences, I mean, we just kind of saw, with the pandemic, this big shift, I would say, in the way that we're reacting now or interacting with more immersive environments and digital environments. And I think that's just going to continue to grow. The pandemic brought about new behaviors, and it kind of accelerated a lot of things. But I think that we were already on a path there beforehand, and we were kind of pushing towards it more exponentially than probably what a lot of us realized. And so when I kind of look at that side of, 3D in the future, this is where I really see that digital fashion will have a big use case, because at the end of the day, when you look at first principles, human nature and human kind of heuristics, they don't change, these kind of, fundamentals. And so when you think about self-expression identity, there will be a big industry and use case for that within 3D and digital, and fashion will have a large market share of enabling that. So that's kind of where I see the future. It's a lot around, when people start interacting with these experiences and these environments in these new worlds, that it will become an expectation that fashion is part of it, that it's, something that can enable status, it can enable vanity, it can enable, new identities.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually. Like, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, if you go into the gaming world, right, like a lot of the idea from this relates to a couple of things. One of them is character customization, right? So this idea that the user invests in the customization of their character, right? So that this customization element has to do with display. It has to do with originality. It has to do with authenticity. It has to do with things like the difficulty of acquiring in-game elements or display elements. So if you have something that's very difficult to get, or very scarce or very rare, then people will, obviously be excited to see it, and they'll be excited, and obviously all of their excitement is gated on the authenticity, right? Because, if you just have a copy of something, and in digital, traditionally without blockchain, digital has been about copying everything, and it's being about like things degenerating in value. So I guess for me, though, the thing that's so interesting about this from a generational perspective is that COVID has created this kind of kick into the digital realm. And I think one of the things that is happening culturally is that there's more fluidity and more consent entering into individual representation, right? So, for example, one of the things that we're seeing, is we're seeing the emergence of, novel gendered pronouns, right? And I think that tendency creates opportunity for representation and, more about individual consensual representation, right? So, it's about people deciding how they want to be represented as opposed to someone else imposing a representation on them. So, how do you look at this? Because I look at blockchain from an open source perspective and from the perspective of sort of consent-based financial infrastructure. So, because you just choose the thing that is the most serving you. So maybe you can comment a bit about that.
Sure. I mean, maybe to start with, like what you mentioned on like more of an exclusivity side, I think that's where I see, NFTs as a distribution channel for natively digital assets. Like you said, in the future with a lot around copying and degeneration of value, but it's kind of enables a supply chain that can hold value, and that can even kind of add growth to value for the future. And I think that's really important because when we think about, scalability of a native digital asset industry, when we have new business models and kind of new monetization models coming in, there has to be that idea of how you can hold value of a digital asset or maintain value. So this is where I see NFTs, particularly when you think about rarity levels and being able to verify and authenticate rarity levels. This is a big thing, and just kind of putting a focus on digital fashion and talking about that side. Even in the traditional fashion industry, a lot of the value of, say a t-shirt or a brand, it's driven around supply and demand. And, these kind of more luxury brands, it's about how they can verify, there's kind of only 40 Yeezys that we're issuing in the world, and then the price and demand goes up. So NFTs for the first time is being able to take that business model and that kind of concept and put it digitally and then authenticate that throughout the entire supply chain process. And I think that's where a lot of value is going to come. And, brands, fashion houses, they're able to, I guess, experiment with that side more. And I think that's going to just continue to grow as they, create more of a digital presence. So, yeah, I believe that blockchain does have, outside of kind of that financial aspect, it does have a very strong use case for digital content distribution. And, I still believe now that the NFT market, it is very revolved around still this investor mindset of, okay, I'm going to buy an NFT asset and I'm going to buy it on a basis of I believe that it will go up in value in the future and I can trade that on a secondary market and gain more value back from it. But I think that this idea of content utility and NFTs, acting as kind of a utility and giving application more to digital content, I really believe that is a strong use case for them in the future. And tying that with authenticity and enabling rarity, that's going to be a big thing or use case for blockchain.
So you mentioned Yeezys, so I'm interested to know kind of your perception of kind of the corporate entry points, because obviously brand things like sponsorship, potentially advertising at some level, so how do you see these influences, in this emerging space?
Very good question. I definitely think, just looking at kind of, again, the growth of the industry, there has been a shift in a sense of, I think, a lot of influencers really looking at this space. If you look at, there's a company in LA kind of a large startup, I think now Genies, and they do a lot of this idea of like avatars and fashion, digital fashion, and they partner with a lot of celebrities and influencers to kind of enable that. And they're slowly moving into the blockchain space. So I think they actually are building on Flow and the Dapper Labs blockchain there. So I definitely think that there is a market opening up for that. And particularly from a celebrity and influencer point of view, it's kind of this whole new distribution and market for them, and a new kind of investor or customer base that they can access and kind of look at kind of how they can tap into value within that. So yeah, from a corporate perspective, I do believe that NFTs, they will have different use cases. I think that the business model around that, it's still not completely defined around what the scalability will be there, and what I guess the buyer market will find value in, because I guess that's still where the missing or link or disparity is. It's around, cosmetic to application of NFTs. And I think that that's going to be a big thing for the future. Is it's not just about, issuing cosmetic NFTs like it is now and being able to gain a lot of value from that, but people will expect utility and application. And this is really what Digitalax we're focused on, is how you can bring utility and application to our NFTs as quickly as possible, and identifying where that product market fit is, where that application is that is really going to add value for a user or a buyer. And so this is kind of what we're experimenting now with and validating, I guess, with our community and our market. Where do they see value within this NFT outside of the cosmetic realm? And where is that, really niche application or usage that kind of, I guess, enables more unlocking of content or value within the NFT itself.
But I think until then, like, the cosmetic component is actually very big and very sufficient. So, one of the things that I saw was an economic modeling of free-to-play gaming as a cosmetics industry, right? Because if you look at free-to-play gaming, the thing that the free-to-play gamers don't want is pay to win, right? So they don't want to purchase items that give them in-game advantage. So because of the free-to-play industry and the growth of kind of skins and the purchasable cosmetic components, you can actually model all of the economic value in those environments as being cosmetic, right? Because, so the point I'm trying to make is, if you actually model them as cosmetics companies, some of those game companies are economically larger cosmetics companies than L'Oreal. Like they're the largest cosmetics companies in the world. They're digital.
Maybe to clarify, I think maybe my definition of cosmetic got mixed up. So when I talk about cosmetic, I was meaning more, from an NFT perspective. Cosmetic is a bit more like you're just buying a PNG file, and then you just have that on your computer in a sense.
I see.
But yeah, definitely when I talk about application utility, I mean, how you can say, I guess, from our perspective, digital fashion, how you could take that in a cosmetic sense into a game. So your avatar could wear it.
Got it. So the application is a cosmetic application, but it's actually, you're bringing it on platform. Like, so you're moving it through the channel into the platform.
100%.
Okay.
Exactly. So instead of just, having like a GIF file on your computer,
right,
you can take that, use that as an avatar, play that within the game. And I definitely believe, free to play models in gaming, and also, DLC, like downloadable content.
Yeah.
I definitely think that is a huge future for actually a business model of gaming. I mean, we saw in the past, it was very much, premium models, pay up front, and then you kind of have access to the game. But now, from a studio perspective as well, it's like how you, decrease this tail end, from kind of the game studios being able to monetize from all of their hard work and the development side. And a big part of that is, instead of just shipping the game and then, letting players play, how can you start bringing in more DLCs and more content? And this is really where Digitalax as well, our vision is based off, is that the future will be for gaming VR 3D content. When there's a greater usage, it will very much be around how you can ship content into these environments faster. And this is why we see NFTs as a scalable distribution from that supply chain perspective, from, streamlining KYC, identity, authenticity, verification, it can actually create more an efficient supply chain for actually being able to, ship content into these virtual environments, more efficiently. And I don't mean that from the perspective of your game has to be blockchain based or your VR world has to be blockchain based. I mean, as we kind of displayed with UCAN, it wasn't about that UCAN had to build on Ethereum or the blockchain, but it's about how we could actually enable the supply chain beforehand with our designers, with our digital fashion pieces, with from a payment side, from that buyer's perspective of creating this, content asset and then taking it into their world and having that accepted and verified within there. So yeah, I think that is going to be a really big part that NFTs can play with enabling these free to play and DLC business models in gaming.
Fantastic. Well, we bounced up against the top of the hour, so I think we do have to close down. But this has been a fascinating conversation, and I'd love to have you back, after a spell, and you can report back to us some of the more exciting, product announcements and auctions and things you've been up to.
That would be great. No, thank you so much, Miko, for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.